Today we're looking at a PlayStation 5 console that doesn't display to a TV. Another one of those where, to be honest with you, the port actually looks okay from the outside. There was maybe minor scratch marks on the back of the PlayStation 5 housing, and there is potential that the customer was wiggling around the HDMI port or trying to, slide it into the port, and therefore it's caused further damage. It's kind of hard to say. This PlayStation 5 specifically looks like it's suffered from quite a bit of smoke. You can tell by looking at the fan inside the console as well as just the general housing. When it comes to cigarette smoke, this can stain the PlayStation 5 console like you can see on the images on the screen now. Some of this can be cleaned off just with a thorough clean. In more often cases, it's actually very difficult to get the stains out of the chassis. The only way to really avoid this type of discoloration would be to not smoke around your console. Let's head on over now to the microscope to see exactly why this console is not displaying on the TV. Let's look at the pins from this perspective first to see what we're dealing with. And again, the unleaded solder that's come from the factory just looks a little bit weak in my opinion. We can indeed confirm this theory by just taking a pokey tool. Yeah, and as you can see, it's not structurally sound. Every single pin almost, let's say 50%, yeah, 50% of the pins seem to be very, very loose, which is not good, but easily explains what's going on with our display issue here. You can see as well that the clasp is broken at the bottom, which means that when you put the HDMI cable in, it's not going to make a good connection. It will make a good connection with the actual pins themselves, but it then allows the port to wiggle around, which can interrupt the connection between the cable and the board. I guess there is also an argument to say, can you not just resolder these pins to the board? Because again, the back of it doesn't look physically damaged. The ground holes are fine. And also the plastic isn't moving about, it's not wobbly. But purely based on the clasp down here and the issue that we have, it's going to be best to replace the port in this circumstance. I'll remove the port off of the board and see what the traces are like on the actual motherboard itself. And can you see some more discoloration here from smoke around the console? Just on the actual port itself. This seems to be on every connection on the board. Here's the USB as well. The ground holes have been suctioned with my solder sucker. It's how I like to clear the ground holes. Makes the process very, very quick and easy, but can be a little bit risky. You can actually end up sucking up one of the caps, especially this little small one here if you're not careful. Just takes a little bit of time, skill, and practice. I used to add leaded solder here to get rid of the solder that's on these pads, but you don't actually need to. As long as there's still enough heat in the board, just take your time, a little bit of wick, and you can get rid of the unleaded that's on the board without applying leaded. There we go. We give it all a nice little clean. You know the drill. Isopropyl alcohol and a cotton swab. But before we do that, we don't actually need isopropyl alcohol because the flux is still liquid and hasn't gotten sticky yet. Now a little bit of IPA for a finishing touch on the cleaning side of things. There we go. Looking good. Now we're going to come along with more flux. Lots of flux. We like flux. Flux is good. Flux is life. Now we apply leaded solder into the ground holes. And we give ourselves a big dollop of it, like ketchup or brown sauce, whatever you prefer, or even mayonnaise. The reason I don't care about how big these blobs are is because when we apply heat to the board and use our drop method, this solder will fall through. And then we just tin these. Lovely jubbly. Look at that. And again, we're just going to get rid of some of this flux because it's not massively needed. And we'll get some fresh stuff on. There we go, looking good. These are a lot smoother compared to when I first started doing these ports, that's for sure. Mistakes will happen. That's in the nature of the business, especially when it comes to electronic repair. That's everything ready and prepped for the new port that I'm about to drop in. Some people like to tin the port itself, but I don't, because I go over the pins after I put the port on. Now ready to apply our fresh flux, just like that. Make sure our fume extractor is near, again, because we don't want to be inhaling the flux fumes. And we're simply circulating the air underneath the board, the hot air. Currently set at 500 degrees Celsius, 120 airflow speed on the Quick 861DW. Rotating that heat nice and evenly as much as we can. And you can see that the solder is starting to wet and the blobs should get sucked right into the board. There we go. 2 on the left and the 2 on the right. There we are. Now we come in with our port. And just slot it. Oh, it stuck to my finger. There we go. That's what I was talking about. Anything can happen. I had flux on my glove. Luckily, we still have all of our components. Circulating that heat and letting that solder come through on the ground legs. That's the most important thing to make sure we have a solid connection. I just want to make sure the port is sat right, which I believe it now is. Push back on it a little bit. There we go. Holding down on the port itself. Coming off the heat. Keep it held down. Wait for the solder to solidify, and then when the board is hot, still hot, we're going to turn it around. There we go. The solder is solidifying now. Perfect. Come off the heat. Come off the port, sorry. There we go. Those pins are actually very well soldered to the point where might not even need to go over these, but I'm going to show you anyway. Plenty of flux. Tiniest blob of solder on the end of my iron tip, like the tiniest, and then simply just go over the pins. Just to make sure that that solder goes from pad to over the pin on the port. I have a tiny bridge there. Got rid of it. Slowly but surely moving down the line. Might need to add a tiny bit more solder to the iron tip. There we go, looking good. And finally, these three are a pain because so close to the cap. But with a steady hand and a dream, I think we're good. Now, again, board is hot. Whilst board is hot, we clean that flux off without using isopropyl alcohol. I find that when you use isopropyl alcohol when the board is very hot and the flux is still runny, it can just spread the flux around and make it even harder to clean because less of it is sticking to the actual cotton swab. So again, I'm just going to heat the board up a little bit, do the pins on the underneath as well. There we go. When I say pins on the underneath, sorry, I mean ground legs. Here I'm actually just removing the old flux, because we want to use some nice new flux to smoothen these out. There's our new flux. Take our iron. Now we know that the solder's come through on the ground legs, so it's just a case of actually making these a bit prettier and less bulgy, because this is just now excess solder that's come all the way through. I feel like it's the board's way of telling me this, you know, you've put too much on. So we simply just need to clean it up. There we go. And again, the flux is hot. Just with a cotton swab. Now, more for a pride factor, pride in my work, just making it look good. I like things to look good. I think it's a good little trademark to have when you're doing soldering work. Yeah, you could leave flux on here, technically, because flux isn't conductive and it's not going to cause any issues. However, it doesn't look nice. And yes, again, there's an argument to say, well, if it works, you don't really need it to look nice, but you could say that about a lot of things. Nice looking clean job, very clean job. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the pins. There we go, looking extremely clean. And look how much the solder is hugging those ground legs. Again, because of this drop method. Lovely. That port is secure. We still have all of our components, the caps, the diode, the resistor, etc. Look good. I can tell by looking at it that we're okay. However, it never hurts just to do a quick inspection of pushing the pins just to make sure that they're solid. You can clearly see that the solder comes over the pin. There we go. You should be able to just see me here. Hello. I'm going to turn the console on the makeshift setup that we have, and I'm just going to see if we get an image. I should have really centered the camera, shouldn't I? But as you can see, PlayStation logo. there we are. And it does say rebuilding database at the moment, so we're just going to have to wait for that to do its thing. There we go. It's come up with adjusting the display area. And just like that, we're going to have another happy customer. If you're in need of a repair, feel free to use the link in the description down below for our mail-in service. You never know, it might end up making a YouTube video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.